All right, let's jump right into this explainer and explore exactly how companies compete, survive, and, actually thrive in highly competitive markets. Because when we look at the corporate world, it honestly often looks like a fierce battlefield. Today, we're going to break down the mechanics of that battlefield, looking closely at what experts call the red ocean strategy, and see how it fits into the much larger context of market strategies.
But before we even start mapping out this battlefield, I want you to ask yourself a question. Are you a fighter, battling for scraps in known waters, or are you an explorer, charting a completely new course? This one simple question is basically the fundamental dividing line in strategic management. It literally defines every choice a company makes, right from the products they design all the way to how they market them.
So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the broad strategic landscape, diving into red oceans, real-world red ocean battles, red versus blue oceans, and finally, implementing your chosen strategy.
Starting with Part 1, the broad strategic landscape, which is basically our map to the battlefield.
You really can't understand a specific competitive tactic without first taking a step back to understand the broader environment. Any successful strategy absolutely has to balance external forces with internal capabilities. Think about those external forces constantly pushing against a company. Things like the economy, shifting technology, political changes, and of course, direct competition. But strategy isn't just about looking outward, right? It relies heavily on the internal environment too, like your organizational culture, your team, and your physical assets. A true winning strategy perfectly aligns those internal capabilities with the external realities.
Within that crazy environment, companies have to decide exactly how they're going to put up a fight. Michael Porter nailed down these foundational strategies which dictate the specific way a firm chooses to battle rivals in an existing market. You can target a really broad market by either being the absolute cheapest option out there, that's cost leadership, or by being completely unique, which is differentiation. Alternatively, you can narrow your focus to a specific niche, applying either a cost focus or a differentiation focus to just that small targeted segment. These are essentially your tools of the trade when you're fighting for a piece of an already existing pie.
That brings us to Part 2, diving into red oceans, the bloody waters of competition. Let's zoom in on where most of these business battles actually take place.
Okay, so here's the crucial thing about a red ocean. It is an established arena where the only way you can possibly grow is by taking market share directly from someone else. The industry boundaries, they're already well defined and everyone accepts them. The rules of the game are completely known. It's a classic zero-sum game. For you to win, a competitor absolutely has to lose.
In these waters, the competition is just intense. It shrinks profit margins down to nothing and forces companies to compete mainly on price, which turns the ocean bloody. Because everyone is trying to exploit the exact same existing customer demand, products start to look completely identical to the consumer. And that leads directly to the commoditization of the industry. When your product is viewed as just another commodity, the only leverage you have left is slashing your prices, making those waters even bloodier.
So, how do you actually survive here? Well, it takes some very specific offensive and defensive tactics. To handle suppliers, you have to lock down the most established and reliable ones. You've got to aggressively raise entry barriers, either fighting off every new player or, simply buying them out. You also have to protect yourself against substitute products by diversifying what you offer and take incredibly good care of your clients, simply because they have so many other alternatives. And as for the competition itself, you must study them constantly just to figure out how to do something a tiny bit different or better than they do.
Moving on to Part 3, Real-World Red Ocean Battles. Let's look at some fighters in the actual arena. To really bring this to life, think about these heavily saturated markets where the barriers to entry are just massive. You've got McDonald's, Burger King, and Wendy's. They all know the rules of the fast food game inside and out. They're trading multi-million-dollar ad campaigns just to fight over who has the better $2 value menu. It's wild. Similarly, Coke and Pepsi aren't just fighting over which soda tastes better. They are waging an absolute war over highly restricted vending space and premium grocery store shelf placement. Breaking into this space as a new competitor is incredibly difficult.
And it's the exact same story whether we're talking about global cars or budget airlines in India. These companies demonstrate the ultimate red ocean principle, survival of the fittest. Toyota has to outmaneuver massive giants like Ford and GM by finding slight edge-outs in reliability or cost. Over in the Indian aviation market, Indigo and SpiceJet are locked in constant, intense conflict, slashing ticket prices to attract the exact same budget-conscious travelers. This is the everyday reality of a red ocean.
Which brings us to Part 4, red versus blue oceans, the fighter versus the explorer.
But what if you literally just don't want to fight a bloody war of attrition? What if there's a totally different approach? Enter companies like SpaceX. Instead of fighting for scraps in a known market, they act as explorers, charting a blue ocean to create and capture altogether new demand. By pioneering the commercial space launch industry, a frontier that previously just did not exist in the traditional commercial realm, SpaceX didn't just beat the competition, they made the competition completely irrelevant. They are operating in wide-open, uncontested market space.
When you put these two mentalities side by side, it creates such a sharp juxtaposition. While red oceans are entirely focused on competing in existing space and beating the competition, blue oceans focus on creating uncontested space and making the competition completely irrelevant. In a red ocean, you're exploiting existing demand. In a blue, you're creating new demand. But honestly, the most vital difference is the value-cost trade-off. Red ocean companies believe they have to choose either differentiation or low cost. Blue ocean strategies break that trade-off entirely, finding a way to pursue both simultaneously.
Finally, Part 5, Implementing Your Chosen Strategy, or How You Actually Survive the Waters.
We've zoomed in on the theory, comparing the red and the blue, but let's get back to reality for a second. How do you actually execute these strategies? The business literature is super clear here. Choosing between cost leadership, a red ocean, or a blue ocean means absolutely nothing if you don't have internal alignment and execution. Spending all this time and effort on planning only to fail at implementation is a massive point of frustration for businesses. Strategy implementation is really about nailing the who, where, when, and how.
Successfully implementing a strategy is a fundamental practice that requires getting all your ducks in a row. Your people, resources, structure, systems, and culture have to be perfectly aligned with your chosen strategy. First, you have to institutionalize it, meaning leaders actively defend and support the vision. Then you translate that grand strategy into actual daily operating plans, so every single department knows what to do. Next, you build an organizational structure that physically supports the strategy. And finally, you have to foster an effective climate, building a culture that truly rewards dedication and teamwork.
Now, if you actually want to survive this brutal competition or successfully chart a blue ocean, you absolutely have to avoid these common internal pitfalls. The number one cause of failure? A lack of ownership. If no one is accountable, the plan just dies. Poor communication leaves your employees completely unaware of their role. Plus, managers often get way too bogged down in daily operational details, treating the strategy as something entirely separate from daily life, like some dusty binder that only comes out once a year. And without tracking progress and establishing a clear reward system, no one feels any forward motion.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought. Your market environment might be incredibly harsh, and those external threats are definitely real, but the strategy you choose to deploy, that is entirely up to you. So what's it going to be? Will you spend your energy outmaneuvering rivals for scraps in the bloody waters, or will you set sail and create your own uncontested ocean? Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. Keep learning and keep exploring.